Hello, listeners. Welcome to part one of Tales of the Sea, a series of stories told by Welsh fisherman Andy Burgess, who spent all of his working life at sea. Andy's nephew Sam grew up listening to his uncle's stories and 30 years later asked him if he'd like to record some to share with family and friends. He obliged, and this is what they came up with. Welcome to Episode 1, A Swift Induction. This was the first time that Andy and Sam sat down recording, and they talk about Andy's fairly brutal initiation into the world of trawler boats. Andy is reading off script for the first few episodes, but as he gets more comfortable, he starts to recall them from memory, which enables us to immerse ourselves more into his storytelling. We hope you enjoy this one.
Go on then. Why don't you sit down? It'll make you feel more relaxed.
No, I don't know if it will. All right.
Okay. Look at me.
I can't,
Tell me the story.
I can't because some stories I know by heart and they'll come out fluently. But this, I've got to say it. You can record it if you like, but you probably won't like it. Anyway. I wish I could find a couple of stories that I could narrate. Anyway, I was decky learner on another Icelandic trawler. As a decky learner, I was allowed on deck only certain times when the skipper deemed it was safe enough and it was unlikely that I would be killed. 3 weeks at sea, 23 men and me. The beginning, it was difficult. 3.5 days steaming to the northeast Cape of Iceland and the same back to Grimsby. We'd been trawling through the sea ice with growlers, which I put in brackets, small icebergs, all around us. It was 20 to 30 degrees below freezing. After 2 minutes on deck, I couldn't feel my fingers. I had ice on my muffler as moist breath froze on it. I could never understand why your eyeballs didn't freeze. It seemed like the crew enjoyed seeing me in pain. I was throwing up a lot. Suggestion, drink pop, it's the worst thing, carrying on deck. Couldn't feel my fingers, suggestion, put your hands on the radiator, worst thing. Excruciating pain. I think the ice crystals under my skin thawing out fast. Cold water is best. Because of the movement of the ship, my arse couldn't relax and I couldn't shit for the whole trip. Not that it mattered much because I threw up a lot of the time. On my second trip, things were marginally better, but not much. I think the crew didn't expect me to come back. I was allowed on deck when the trawl had been hauled in and no machinery was moving. My job was to grease the shackles, help haul the gear about, fill needles with twine for the crew to mend the net, and occasionally, if there was time, mend a few small holes. Still threw up for 4 or 5 days until I got used to it. The crew worked 18 and 6, which meant 18 hours of work and 6 off. I was told that we'd got it easy now, as it used to be 20 and 4, but because of all the injuries and men falling in the gear through tiredness, the trawler owners allowed us 2 extra hours.
Treats.
So instead of 20 and 4, because a lot of men got killed, see? But it didn't make any difference because you didn't get 6 hours sleep. By the time you got in, fell onto your bunk with all your gear in. You didn't go to sleep, you weren't unconscious. And the next thing, somebody's shaking you, back on deck, maybe grab a cup of tea, back on deck, and then same old thing.
Yeah. Did you not bother? You don't get dry then? You just go to sleep in your gear?
Depends.
Did you
if you were so exhausted, well, you take your bottoms off and your top, and then you had clothes on, just fell in your bunk. Just totally exhausted. See, I've repeated myself there somehow. I'll read some that I've repeated here. If you were stupid enough to touch a piece of metal on deck with your bare hands, we had to cut the ice to free them. Standing in a pound of fish, I could always feel my feet, which many couldn't. It was always a bit dodgy getting into a pound of fish, as you didn't know what was at the bottom. For instance, if you put your foot in a fish's mouth, depending on what it was, you could lose toes or more. I remember hearing the odd scream when somebody had done that. Several species of fish you could worry about. Wolffish had big teeth and powerful jaws. Conger eel, we didn't get many of those. Mud grubbers, old cows we used to call them, and monkfish, big mouth, needle-like teeth.
Right.
Because you were in here, up to here.
What's a pound of fish, like a ton of fish? How many tons?
No. A pound is an area that was, the whole deck was covered. There were stanchions coming up which had crosses in. You put the pound boards in, and they were sections of probably, half of the size of this.
Like a raised bed, so you're creating little divisions. Yeah.
This high.
Right.
And when the fish were dropped in there, kept dropping them until it was full.
Yeah.
Then you had to stand in the fish to gut them, and then you threw them into the washer.
They're probably not very happy about that either.
What?
They're probably not very happy about that either.
Well, this is what we did.
If you fell over into it, I could imagine that could be quite scary.
No, it's mostly fish like cod or pollock, or mostly. But the mud grubbers, which we used to call old kettles, were about 10 feet long, but they had a tiny tail and a big mouth. So the tail would stick up and you think, oh, it's dogfish. But it wasn't a dogfish, because the whole of the body was underneath, and you put your foot in its mouth when you trod down into the fish, and it would close. But it wasn't dangerous because they had no power in their jaws. But you didn't know that because you couldn't see down there. So it could have been a wolffish, a monk or whatever, and then you would probably, be injured.
Right, they're powerful, wolffish.
Very powerful, particularly wolffish, which I love to eat. And wolffish were about, say, 3 or 4 foot long. Icelandic wolffish were jelly-like. I never liked them because they felt like jelly. But the ones we got in the North Sea, they were straight downwards, white and black, all the way down. And they had a big bony head with big teeth, and they used to eat scallops and mussels that were on the bottom. And that was there. So, obviously, anyway, the crew, when we went ashore, we were allowed to take some fish with us, and I always took one of those, cutleted it up.
And they're nice to eat.
But the crew would never take...
Bottom feeder doesn't sound like the best fish to eat.
No, these weren't bottom feeders. They ate...
Mollusks.
Yeah, so you could imagine, because of what they ate, their flesh would be really tasty, and it was. We used to cutlet it up and fry them. It was gorgeous fish. But the crew could never understand why I would take such an ugly fish home, because they never tried it.
Right, yeah.
Silly fuckers.
It doesn't look appealing, does it? When you say black and white stripes, that smells of poisonous danger to me. And then we've got horrible face.
If you got bitten by one of those, you would not come out of it. You would come out of it. Another instance, right? Over the years, when we were saying netting, the fish got dropped into a pound. And then you'd get monkfish with massive mouths like this. But they were all mouthed and there was a tiny little tail at the back. Considered a rough back then, delicacy these days. But the mouths were always open, and inside the mouth you could see a pile of plaice. So I was happily pulling the plaice out like this for years.
Intact?
What?
Intact, like the plaice are not chewed up.
But they're just fallen in there, because the mouth was open. They're always open. So I was happily pulling these plaice, like nice tidy one, pulling them out like this. And anyway, a crew member came along and he said, "Watch this," he said. So he stuck a stick in the corner of the mouth and it went and lose your fucking hand.
Yeah.
No problem. Because it wasn't the power, it was just the speed it closed out. And needle-like teeth about 1.5 inches long, like a fucking needle, they would Oh, definitely. It didn't stop me doing it because I knew I wasn't touching the corner of the mouth.
Right.
But I had done it for years.
What, and he didn't show you until you'd been doing it for a time? You've been doing it for a long time?
Well, no, there's probably a new ship. I used to change ships quite often.
Yeah.
You know, if there was the skipper said, "Oh, we're fitting now. We're going to be in for a week." Right, fuck that. I'm off. Sign me on another boat. Used to go do consolidated or slates. Sign me on another boat. And I was off on them.
So they just take. I'm not saying you're just anybody, but a skipper would take. If a bloke turned up and he liked the cut of his jib, he'd go, "Yeah, you're on," without any references.
No, because they knew.
They knew you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
well known down the docks.
Well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Anyway, forget all that.
Right.
So most of this is about the learning times of my life, I suppose. So.
Welcome to Episode 2, Superstition, the Italian Aquaman, Death Jackets. Today we have 3 short stories where Andy talks about some of the do's and don'ts on board, a challenge with an unbeknown Olympic swimmer, and a lifesaver that thankfully never had to be used. We hope you enjoy them.
Got another one?
Yeah, another pile. I better...
Just have a skip through and see the one which you feel like you know the best, or you can...
I know what I'm trying, I am trying.
Yeah.
Okay. Small story, superstition. Right, superstition. I once got the sack for throwing an old boot found in the net over the side. If you found a boot, you put it near the mast and took it ashore. As I have mentioned before, women weren't allowed on the deck as it was thought to be unlucky. Obviously, the Russians didn't believe that. I got bollocked for whistling a tune if you were whistling for wind, which we didn't want. In Grimsby, there were no gulls on the fish docks, but in Scotland, they were everywhere. Standing on the fish docks in Scotland, we had just landed our catch and a gull came up to me and pecked my leg. I was just about to boot it away when one of our crew said they believed the souls of fishermen resided in gulls, and if you hurt or killed one of them, it would go badly for you.
I agree. I think... is whistling unlucky on a boat then?
Yeah.
Because it encourages wind that you don't want?
Well, whistling for wind is what he said.
Right. And I didn't know that about the boat either.
All right, this is quite good, this one. This includes a little bit here, but it spans like 20 years or whatever. But anyway.
Right.
Right. On some occasions, if you were with a tidy skipper, summertime, hot as hell, he'd say, I'm waiting for the tide to turn. You've got half an hour. No need to say any more. Stripped off and over the side for a swim. Open your eyes underwater. You could see 20 feet or more. Back on deck for a last swim, I wanted to dive under the keel and up the other side. So from the top of the wheelhouse into the sea was about 8 feet or 10. So I'd get a head start. Nowhere near. Pain in my eardrums, etc. I met a guy in later life. I had joined the BSAC, British Sub-Aqua Club, and had been going through training with them. My friend asked if he could come, and I said okay. I was in the pool, and my friend asked if he could join. The trainer said, can you swim? With that, he dived in and swam to the end of the pool, creating a bow wave, flipped round at the end, swam back, and just ended up standing next to the trainers on the side of the pool. Their mouths fell open and said he was in. We'd be in the deep end of the pool and he'd empty his lungs after a few deep breaths. And when I followed him down, he'd be sitting on the bottom of the pool making faces at me. Have you ever tried laughing underwater? Not good. Turns out he was in the Italian Olympic team and used to swim around the island he lived on. The worst car driver I have met, but by God he could swim. Maurizio's name was. Funny guy.
A lot of sailors don't worry about being able to swim, do they? Because they go, I shouldn't be swimming. I should be on the boat.
It was irrelevant whether he could swim or not. Because if you were, like one time, I haven't written about this, but we got border trade life jackets delivered aboard, and they had the full kit, like, and the whatever.
What, inflatable?
No, they were already, so they were board certified, they were the best.
Right.
Delivered aboard, so we packed them away, took the old life jackets out, we were at sea then, threw them over the side and they sank. Yeah.
Welcome to episode 3, Seagulls. Today we have a short story where Andy tells us the habits and his observations of the birds he shared the sea with. Spoiler alert, we're still off script, but I think we're getting close. We hope you enjoy this one.
Right. This is about the gulls, right, that we used to see at sea all the time.
Reincarnated sailors, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The gulls we used to see at sea when we were fishing were mostly full Mars, and you see them out here as well. Although they are deep sea gulls, mostly way out. Built like a bomber aircraft, big bodies, short wings. They used to take off from the sea with their wings out and run in across the surface of the sea. And when we were steaming, they would fly close to us, matching our speed. You could reach out from the deck and touch their wingtips. I grabbed a wingtip one time and it bit me. How could it reach my hand from 2 feet away and bite me and still carry on flying? Occasionally, one would land on the deck by accident. First thing it would do was throw up to lighten its load to take off. But they were masters when it came to flying. Their wingtips raked the sea as they flew. Occasionally, one would fuck up. Wingtips dug a little deeper into the sea than was intended, and they would cartwheel into the sea, probably feeling like an arse. But they were tough. Then there were the kittiwakes, much smaller, but they could change direction in an instant. I saw a black-backed gull, big gull then, obviously pissed off a kittiwake, who flew down and plucked out one of his tail feathers. But the ones I liked seeing most were the gannets. I see them at sea where I live now. As we are hauling the net in, small fish were escaping. The gannets would be gliding overhead 20 or 30 feet up. They'd turn, wings folded, and dive like an arrow into the sea. As the sea was so clear, you could often see them catch their fish, open their wings and fly to the surface where they would swallow their fish and take off to glide above again.
And a gull's sick before it takes off to lighten its load.
Yeah.
And they all do that. It's quite common.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they couldn't, and
That's why
they threw up, but they still couldn't take off.
That's
because
why-
they couldn't run anywhere because of all the pounds and everything. But it was a reaction. So you just get hold of them and throw them on the side and they'll be fine.
People shit themselves for the same reason. You know, when you panic,
Yeah,
you shit yourself. It's to make you lighter to run.
yeah. I know.
And that's just, I only found that out a few years ago.
It's fucking boring.
And then hitting the sea, you know, misjudging it, hitting the sea and cartwheeling. Good description. If you could tell me that, just looking at me though, without reading
What?
it, that story. It was a brilliant story.
What? About the girls?
About the gulls, because it's about nature, or, you know, your time. It's not just about fishing.
I can't do it really.
You can. When we just talk, let's go and get another beer,
Yeah.
and we'll just talk.
Welcome to episode 4, Rough and Ready. Today, Andy tells us about the shadier characters you might meet on board, and even with their differences, every man has to look out for each other no matter what. We hope you enjoy this one.
This is, I'll just read you this.
Yeah.
We were fishing out of Buckie in Scotland and landing there too. If we were fishing a long way from home, sometimes for 3 months or so, the crew would take the train home to be with their families for a few days, particularly if the weather wasn't good enough for sea. So as I didn't have a family to go home to, I would be left in charge of the boat. I didn't have much to do, mainly pumping out. There's plenty of food aboard, so I didn't want for anything. There were lots of pubs along the docks, and I had got to know some of the locals. Anyway, I'd gone up to town for a change. I went into this bar, and there was this guy dancing on a pool table. I asked the staff why they didn't throw him out, and they said he owned the place. Anyway, lots of pints later, I left to head back to the boat. I just got out, and this guy hit me, and I went down, cracked my head on the pavement, stunned, and he was kicking and punching me. The bar staff came out, and he was off. They said they would take me to hospital, but I went back to the boat. I straightened my nose out, and the ribs hurting like hell, went to bed. The staff must have reported the incident to the police, and they came down to the boat for a statement from me. I was always a good healer, thick blood. If I got cut, it would scab in a couple of hours. In a few days, not even a scar. Anyway, I was walking across a bridge in the middle of town in Aberdeen with a few of the crew. This guy came up to me and said, "I got 3 months because of you." I said, "I'm sober now. Do you want to try it again?" He walked off. At that time, I thought his reaction was quite odd, but in retrospect, he wasn't afraid. It was because there were too many witnesses, like there was the last time.
Yeah.
We've all been there, haven't we? And,
You're
Anyway.
not down with violence, are you? At all?
no, I say that throughout my stories. I hate it, and I do to this day hate hurting people.
And you're surrounded by the worst of the worst, not the worst of the worst, but you know, people that get jobs on trawler boats tend to not be.
One ship I was on, I was the only man aboard who hadn't done serious time. If you wanted to get a job, you could always get a job on a trawler. You come out of jail, nobody wanted you. Get on a trawler. So murder, rape, GBH, one with a pedo on, which I found out. But they wouldn't hurt, you wouldn't hurt anybody aboard because your life depended on them. Every man looked after each other, no matter what they'd done. Because if one man went over the side and maybe the pedo was there who could help him, he'd think, let him go. Just give me a hard time, fuck him. But when they were ashore, people like that used to hide away because they would be killed. When crews, particularly trawler crews, went ashore, it was, people used to die, stab, whatever, all the time. It was never hit the news, it was normal.
But not on the boats. Did you witness fights on the boats?
It's just because you had to look after the other guy, because your life depended on it. I've been washed over the side twice and got washed back in by the next wave. Now, that didn't always happen. I've been over the side 3 times in my life by accident. The third time, we were hauling a net. There was this big stone in the bottom, hugely. I was standing next to the sheave, so the rope went up through the sheave over to the capstan where somebody was hauling it on. It parted on the sheave, smacked me on the head, knocked me out. I fell on the net, and I was going out because the weight of the stone was dragging it out. Somebody grabbed my legs and pulled me back, held me against the bulkhead until I came round, and then we got on with it. My fucking ear blew up like a fucking orange. And a couple of days later, because I was a great healer, back to normal. Oh, some beer, fucking hell, some beer.
Some of it. Oh.
And I don't
See,
know
Andy, that last 3 minutes was perfect. You just telling me that story there, that was perfect.
What?
That last 3 minutes, the way you described that story, because you weren't reading off the script, you were just telling me. And it was
about the stone?
About the stone and nearly getting pulled over, because it was natural. Trust.
Oh, I'll tell you what, when we did fetch that stone aboard, it was, what we should have done, in retrospect, was cut it away, but it would have cost thousands. But that stone really killed loads of people. It was like Mission Impossible, when everything was going on. The stone was swinging about, smashing stanchions and everything. And people were diving for cover. See it now. Fuck. I don't know, Sam.
Welcome to Episode 5, The Bomb. In today's story, we hear how Andy's crew narrowly escaped from being blown up in the North Sea after hauling up more than they bargained for. His story gives an insight into how different people react when it's life or death. We hope you enjoy this one.
Right, we do the bomb now.
The bomb.
Okay, we were out in the North Sea, somewhere. Couldn't see land, of course, but out in the middle there. Sea all around you. And day like any other. We were bringing the cod end aboard, and there was something poking out each end of the bag of fish that we just brought up. And the skipper said there was a barrel in there. Put a pound board in the middle, so when we drop it, it won't damage the deck. So put a pound board in the middle, open the cod end, whoosh, all the fish comes out, and on top of the pound board was a 200-pound silver, looked like brand new bomb. Well, reaction time. I've always been practical. So the mate was stood next to the pound looking at it. The skipper was white as a sheet. So I went aft, climbed down the engine room to get a strop, which is a circle of rope spliced into itself, if you like. so that we could, anyway, so back on deck, a minute later, that's all it took for me to go down the engine room, get a strop, come back. Skipper, exactly the same, white as a sheet, hanging on to the Gilson wire, not doing anything. The cook was sat on the opposite gunwale, facing outwards, with a life jacket in one hand and a box of biscuits in the other. The mate, he was in the pound, leaning next to the bomb, trying to read the writing on it. So I put the strop round the tail of the bomb, hooked the Gilson on, back into action then. Skipper hauled it up. I slashed the strop to release the bomb. Skipper dived into the wheelhouse, put the ship in full ahead. We couldn't go far because we were anchored, so it was just the stretch of the anchor. But we didn't want to be over the top of the bomb when it went off. Straining ahead, with the anchor wire was taut. 5 minutes, 10 minutes passed, maybe half an hour later, nothing. It had to travel maybe 150 feet down before it hit the bottom, so we had that space of time to get ahead of where it would have blown up.
How long would that take, do you think, for it to, at that speed, before it would have hit the bottom?
Well,
at 150 metres? A
minute, 2 minutes. Anyway, so yeah, well, so the well, that was it. It wasn't going to go off, so hauled the anchor up and left. But the skipper reported the position of the bomb to the Admiralty, so no other fishing boat would fish there again.
Crazy stuff. How long had you been fishing at that point?
Can't remember.
Never seen one since?
Never seen a bomb since, no.
And it looked brand new? You think it would all
Yeah,
be...
but because it had been washed around it, I suppose, on the bottom. And any paint would come off it. Anyway, brings me back to think about another thing. I wasn't on this boat, obviously. This is a trawler, but while I was at sea, I heard about this. This trawler had picked up a mine. Now, whether the mine was on the bottom or it's floating, we don't know. But what they had done is they picked it up and stowed it on the forecastle. This is the front part of the ship near the bows. You could go below there were bunks down there for people to sleep. But so there was a group of fishermen or crew chatting next to the mine. Why anybody would want to pull it aboard, God knows. Anyway, they did that, they struck it down. Anyway, one of the crew touched something and it blew up. Killed all the guys that were stood and took out half the forecastle.
With all the beds underneath, that's where everyone's sleeping.
Well,
were there people...
It would have been, yeah.
Multiple deaths.
It would have smashed the deck as well
yeah.
as taking out the whole of the forecastle. It was, well...
Why, like you said, why would they bring it on board, I suppose?
Well, fucking nuts.
Yeah. Like a mine, like you see on the movies with the spikes.
Yeah.
Right.
It was.
So they knew what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, fuck that. I'd have done what you did. Put it back in the sea.
Yeah.
Tell the Coast Guard.
Well, you informed the Admiralty if there was an incident which could be endanger the lives of other fishermen or seagoers as to the position of wherever this happened. But the forecastle, when it was taken out, didn't sink the ship, but just killed all the crew that were around it and severely damaged the forecastle, but didn't sink the ship.
Welcome to episode 6, The Cloud and the Knot. Andy tells us about some of the strange weather phenomenons that he's seen at sea and how not everyone knows the best way to haul in a net. We also start to understand the motivations for these men. A good 10-day trip could buy you a house in the 1980s. Andy's starting to get into the storytelling and narrating off script a bit more. We hope you enjoy this one.
Tell you another one now, which comes into my mind. The Cloud.
Yeah.
Recording still.
Go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, somewhere in the North Sea, we were, we'd just shot the net, gone round, and picked up our anchor, so we were hauling in first gear, which is really slow. Before that, before we started hauling, the skipper spotted this cloud. It was a brilliant blue. All the way around us was blue. Nothing in the sky, no clouds. And there was this black cloud in the distance. And you could see the other side of it. So it was very small. And it was so weird because it was there on its own. Anyway, it got bigger, so that meant it was coming towards us. So, and we were getting about our normal jobs and this and that, getting the deck ready for hauling ropes in. Maybe we got a few part of the rope in. Anyway, the black cloud came over us and the temperature suddenly dropped. It started hailing. And not like ordinary hail, which was little bits. These were chunks of ice falling out the sky. Stopped the winch, everybody dived below. The cook, who was the last one, got hit by a chunk of ice and he opened his cheek up, blood everywhere, down the forecastle. And all of a sudden, it was like machine gun bullets hitting the deck above us, like that. And the temperature was, it was freezing and it was gale force, just in an instant. And then all of a sudden it stopped. Went on deck. Deck was covered with ice, chunks of ice. Couldn't see the deck. We had to wade our way through the ice. And then started the winch and it carried on hauling. Brilliant, summertime, 80 degrees. Lovely.
Freak weather.
And that cloud continued on its way and got smaller and smaller into the distance.
Yeah. Things you see at sea.
That was so weird. You wouldn't believe it. And the odd thing is, if you get a cloud coming towards you, you can't see the other side of it because it fills the sky.
Yeah.
Because when you're at sea, it is different to on land. You've got mountains and trees and everything. It breaks up your horizon. But when you're at sea, your horizon is all around you and the sky meets the sea. If you hadn't experienced, you wouldn't understand really.
I've been out at sea where I can't see land.
Yeah.
For a period of time, a couple of days. And I remember swimming and it was quite eerie because I jumped off and I had no reference and I panicked a bit. And then wanted to come back in onto the boat. But yeah, and also it's deceptive because the horizon's only about 8.5 miles away, isn't it? When you're standing at sea level. So it's not actually that far.
But where we fished, where it was the Dogger Bank or the coal boat, or wherever position we were out in the middle of the North Sea somewhere. And there's only the skipper knew where we were. When we left dock, he'd take us out the dock, out the river, and then set a course, and then we had watches, 3 hours each. So you'd take your watch, steer the course the skipper had set you, you'd be on a wheel, and when
you say course, just by compass? That's all you've got,
by
isn't it?
compass, yeah. Back then, yeah. And so you steer your course, and when your time was up, when your 3 hours was up, you'd walk across the deck, you'd leave the wheel, put a strop on it so it wouldn't move, walk along the deck, go down the forecastle, down the ladder, which took you into the galley and then walk through into the mess deck, as it was. Shake the next crew member who's on watch next, shake him awake, and then he'd go back on the wheel. He'd make himself a cup of tea, mug of tea, and he'd walk back and relieve you.
And
So
the
you-
strop on the wheel was like autopilot back in the day.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
so it went off course, so it didn't matter.
Right.
It was only a few bloody minutes anyway. Fucking hell. And that was it. And then you'd roll in, go to sleep, and then it'd be probably get woken up 6 hours later or whatever for food or shooting or whatever.
Shooting being shooting the
Shooting
net.
the net, yeah. So you got 4 miles of rope,
Yeah.
roughly. So you were anchored, right? So the rope was attached to the anchor. So as you were shooting the net, shooting the gears, the rope you would run out over the side past the shooting bar,
Yeah.
which it was through the gunnel and down into something that held it on the deck. So that would shoot, and normally you get people, somebody would be there to watch it in case any knots went over. So we had this guy in this particular time who, what you would do, if a knot went over, you couldn't stop and untangle it, it was going. So you would put the rope around the shooting bar and hold it against itself, and you'd feel the knot pull out or tighten, whichever. Mostly it pulled out. And then, carry on. If another went over, you do the same. And this guy had an unusual way of doing it. He just stamped on it, pushing it against the deck and the side of the gunnel.
Hoping it would unfurl.
Yeah, but he could feel it through his foot, the same. But he'd always done this. He was a new crew member, I didn't know. Anyway, as I was walking aft, round the back, side of the wheelhouse, aft, he just put his foot against it. Then he looked at me to say something. But what he didn't realise was there was another knot coming straight after it, caught hold of his foot, pulled him over the side. He was hanging on the shooting bar like that, and thank God it pulled his boot off.
Right.
Because if he'd have gone down with the gear,
With the net.
by the time, no, with a rope, by the time we'd have got back to him, he could be dead because he couldn't hold his breath that long. By the time we'd gone astern, put
Yeah.
the rope back, it could have been 30 seconds, a minute,
What
whatever.
were you letting off the boat? Was it not a net on a rope, or was it
We used to shoot like 2 miles of rope out.
just rope?
We used to go in a triangle,
Yeah.
out so far, then we'd go that way, and then the net would go out, we'd carry on a bit, another half mile, and then back. And we'd tow the rope back to the anchor, where we clipped on, put the ropes through a sheave, round a capstan and out to the coiler. You coiled the rope on deck. And then we used to drag a pile of rope, maybe 50 pounds in weight or whatever, and chuck it on the pile. Keep doing that. You get somebody at the other side who was doing the same aft, because you had 2 ropes coming in. And
Where's the net, Andy? Where's the net?
the net was at the end of the ropes. Is being pulled. You had to feel the ropes to see if one was slacker than the other, so that they.
Right.
So it was like you kept it even.
So you shimmy it in,
Yeah.
and then how big was the actual net? If the rope's 4 miles, was the net half a mile or quarter of a mile?
Well, it covered an area of seafloor
Yeah.
which the ropes were on, and because of the thumping on the capstan as the rope slid down it. If you've seen a capstan work, you would understand. But because you haven't seen it work, so you won't understand. But it used to make a thumping sound which reverberated down the ropes to the net, so the fish, frightened by the sound, would keep within the ropes.
Right.
So eventually the net would sweep them up, and we'd...
And you must have got snagged up on reefs, and is that
Well,
not an issue if you're dragging on the bottom?
Sometimes you did. Sometimes you got snagged. Then you'd have to put the rope back on the hauler, go back to where it was stuck on something, pull it off, and then you shoot it again and carry on.
Mm.
So it was stuck in a rock. or something.
Relatively easy. Can you lose a lot of gear getting it snagged? I'd imagine. Doesn't sound like a simple task.
No.
Snagging a rope that's however many hundred metres down.
It didn't happen very often because the skippers generally knew the ground.
Right.
And they knew, well, if it was rough ground, you wouldn't shoot a seine net over it, because he would tear the net to shreds anyway, even if he didn't get stuck. So it was a sandy or clay bottom or whatever.
How did they get their knowledge? There was no electronic GP. There was no. Did you have any echo sounders or any modern technology?
Yeah,
oh, you did.
Well, it was fairly basic. It was an echo meter. It sounded the bottom, and that's all you had.
Yeah.
Whereas when, and this is, I don't know how to say this, but our skipper, I'd sailed with this guy, Eric Lose in this particular case. I'd sailed with him for 3 years, and all the crew had as well, so we knew each other well, and he decided that he was going to get a sonar, and we were going to go gill netting, which was there was no gill netters out of the British Isles.
What's gill netting?
Where you shoot a line of nets, all connected, say 50 metres long, hung, I think it was hung 9 feet.
On floats?
So when the net was down on the bottom, there were steel rings on the bottom of the net. So the steel rings would sit on the bottom. Or on a wreck, it would go up like that. It was finely balanced, so the floats kept it up from the bottom like a curtain.
Yeah.
And we would shoot on rough ground with that. But, okay, there was nobody in this country. So he took a huge risk and a financial risk going over to Denmark to get fitted out with a sonar, and it took up, out of 15 pounds of, in our fish room, there was like 15 lockers, if you like, where we used to put our fish. And it took 1 whole pound for all the electronics which
To run
worked
the sonar.
our sonar. So you'd be down in the cabin, and there was a big pole there, and it was, when he was using the sonar, it was you slide down through the bottom of the boat, and he could look in any direction. And I remember skipper called me in a wheelhouse. He said, "Come and have a listen to this." And he because he was pointing at a pod of dolphins, we could hear them speaking to each other.
Really?
Yeah,
Right.
really good. But so we went over there. We went up to Denmark to get fitted out, and we were there a month while all the ship was being. So we had.
How come it's so? That's a lot of work. Is it not just a machine that echo meter or echo?
Yeah, but
It's just
you're
bouncing
talking
back.
bloody 50 years ago now.
I suppose so. It's like everything was 10 times bigger than it.
Yeah,
than it is,
exactly.
Yeah.
So when we got to, I can't remember the name of the port now, anyway, we went in there. And it was quite unusual. I think the Danes were about 10 years ahead of us. Wearing seatbelts was mandatory in the country, where it wasn't in this country.
I'm good here.
Okay.
It's all right. Doesn't matter. Just we can continue that. I'm gay. You all right?
Do you want to turn this off?
No, keep it on.
Are you upstairs?
Oh, we could pause it. Yeah.
We're recording.
That's all right. You're on the recording. Hang on.
See that?
Don't. You've got to save it now. Where were we at?
We're in.
So you can remember where we were. You think we're in Denmark?
We're recording now.
Yep.
Okay, so we're in Denmark to get fitted out with our sonar gear. So we were there for, I don't know, 3 weeks or a month perhaps. I can't remember. Well, it was a long time. But the skipper, when we arrived in Denmark, he gave us 200 quid each, free.
Right.
Which was a huge amount of money, really. But when you realised how expensive things were, particularly beer, it made sense. So the Danes were very clean. The docks were pristine. You could see down through the water to the bottom of the dock. In Grimsby, you couldn't see down 2 inches because they were so dirty. And anyway, so the docks themselves were spotless all the time. And each person who owned a house would be responsible for their house and the size of their house and their garden out to the middle of the road. So there was never any pieces of paper or anything, because they were responsible for keeping. So all the roads were spotless. And I remember one time going to a cafe and I'd order a cup of tea for me and the other 2 crew members and explaining to the girl how to, try and work out, because although a lot of them could speak English and understand it, with such a broad Grimsby accent, it was difficult for them. But I managed to get it through. We wanted 3 cups of tea, so got that, took it back to our table, we drank that, and we had nothing to do, so the decky cook said, I'll get an order. So he goes up to the bar to say to the girl, and he says, 3 cups of tea, love? Well, fuck me. I mean, even if she spoke the Queen's English, he wouldn't understand what he'd said. We all thought it was really amusing. And back then, we had cameras with films in. So we took a few photos of various things, and one was, we were all leaning against this machine which would say fag machine or something, give you packets of cigarettes. And this particular one, we were all leaning against it. I remember going back then, and somebody asked what the machine was, and we said it was a fag machine, but it wasn't. It was, they were selling porn books.
And you didn't realise?
Yeah. They were incredibly open about sex. In fact, one of the only 2 times this was, I got to know some people, as you do, chatting and all that, and having a few beers. And this guy offered me to sleep with his wife. And it didn't sit right with me, because I'm not prudish, but it didn't feel right, so I refused. And I've had 2 experiences of that, and that was just one of them. Anyway, so we got all fitted out, and then we sailed back then from Denmark to Grimsby to get fitted out with all the specialist gear we needed. So we didn't need the hauler anymore, which was a big machine which coiled all the ropes and all that. So that was taken off, and in its place, it was a big tank of water with pipes shooting in from 2 different angles from the sea into it. So it was churning water around all the time. And it was like a chip pan, where you get a wynette inside. So when you pull your chips out of the pan, they come out free of fat. But in this case, it was when you hauled it up, it just left the fish in there to drain out before it continued its journey over to the fish room hatch, where the fish were tipped down into the fish room to be iced away. So we got that fitted. I mean, obviously he had to pay us to be there and all that. And then we had to get our nets, 50-metre long or 50-yard long nets, 9-foot hung, which meant that they hung up from the bottom up 9 feet hung, so that any fish changing from one side of a wreck to the other would swim through the net and therefore be gilled, hence gill netting. So we went back then to Grimsby, and we'd ordered 200, 300 nets. They're all there, had to be stacked. We had to learn how to use the gear and all that sort of thing. So eventually we went to sea, and instead of the hauler that we had, it was like a belt which run on motors, which was a continuous belt, and on top were 2 big balls filled with water, so it would trap the net as it was coming through. And so when we shot the nets, we'd haul them, it would come through, up through the belt, and the balls would hold the net as it was coming through. So when we got one net in, we'd untie it from the other and take it apart, take the fish out, and then put the nets onto back ready for shooting. So anyway, so we went there, went back to Grimsby, got the nets, we knew what to do, and we went to sea. So we did, I think it was 3 trips, and we weren't making any money because the skipper was playing or experimenting with the sonar to see what it could do. Anyway, we got fed up with this because we weren't making any money. He said he was going to make us some money, and he wasn't. So the 3 crew of us, me and Decky Cook and a mate, said, fuck this. So we told the skipper, take the bastard home. We don't want to work for you anymore. And he said, you're all fucking sacked.
Right. This is whilst you're out at sea?
Well, we're at sea, right? Yeah. So I'm not fishing anymore, take it home. He said, you're all sacked. Right, fine. So we went back to our various places at home. And he probably had a little think about it. We'd been with him for 3 years, for God's sake. And he went round us individually and asked us to come back with him with the promise of making a fortune. And he did make us a fortune.
With the new sonar? Is that what helped?
Yeah.
So it all paid off?
So he had been experimenting for 3 trips, and we weren't making any money. And so he...
What was the cut for each crewman? What percentage?
Okay. Decky Cook got 8%, Decky got 10%, mate got 12%, and making up 8, 10, 12. And the skipper, who could be not the owner, but somebody who was running the boat, he got up to the 50% mark. So that was like 8, 10, 20.
What, how much, and then that leaves the
Wait a
owner.
minute, 12.
It's
Oh,
thir-
yeah,
30
and
it's
the
30
skipper...
It's 30% for everyone. The 8, 10 and 12 is 30%.
10, right.
And then you've got 50%, which leaves 20% for the owner.
No, 20% that went to the skipper.
I thought you said 50% the skipper got.
No, look, 8% and 12%, that was 20%.
20%.
The
Plus,
mate got 15, so that was...
you're changing the numbers now. You said 8, 10 and 12% went out to decky cook, decky and mate. 8%, 10%, 12%, that's 30% in total.
Yeah.
And then you said the skipper got 50%.
No.
So, I'm only
So
going on what you
the
told me.
skipper, if he was a hired skipper, he'd get 20%.
Okay,
The owner got the other 50,
yeah.
which he'd have to pay out for ice and oil, blah, blah, and all this taxes and shit like that.
And what would a good, let's say in today's money, if you went out on a standard trip with a 4-man crew, how much money could you earn in today's money off? And how long would you be fishing for?
When we were gill netting, which was the most money we ever made, I'd have a top line of 1,200 quid average,
For how long out at sea?
10 days.
10 days, so £120 a day, which would you be saying, how many years ago was that? 30 years ago?
50 years ago.
50 years ago.
Or you could buy...
So you're talking the equivalent
back
of
then,
about
you could buy a house for 2.5 grand.
You're probably talking the equivalent of, say, 750 quid to £1,000 a day on a good trip.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, I've lost the track now.
It doesn't matter. We're just
all
talking.
right, okay. So, an average trip gill netting would be, say, 1,200, but in 50% tax. So he only got 600 in your hand.
I thought you didn't pay tax when you were at sea. You know, like people on cruise ships, they don't pay income tax, but you got tax.
We did.
Right.
But we had, you could sign on the dole when you were in as a share fisherman. So you got your stamp paid and you got a few quid in your hand. But I never did that because I didn't need to. Now, I should have done.
Glad you didn't.
And which brings me to another story, which I'm not going to tell now. Yeah, so we...
You've made the average, we were talking about gill
we
netting.
averaged 1,200 for 10 days. And then, like I said to you, Eric fought a case against the lumpers so that we could land our own fish, which we could do anyway. We just used the machinery we'd got aboard to take, instead of having a capstan on the quay. You know, it worked out seamlessly, but it was work for us. But we got paid handsomely for it, so nevertheless.
Good money compared to most local people where you were
Well,
living. Even
when
though
I
it's seasonal.
earned £1,200 for 10 days' work, my top line then, the average wage was £25 a week.
Wow.
So if I came in dock and I'd have a taxi waiting for me, my favourite taxi driver, he'd take me to wherever I wanted to go. And he'd wait for me if I was in a pub or a club, he'd wait outside for hours. I'd be paying him to wait for me.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the series, and a special thank you to Andy for sharing his stories. Goodbye for now.